What if comparison is actually good for you? Now hear me out, because I know this goes against the grain of what the personal development gurus and the podcasters and the motivational speakers will tell you is true. But what if comparison is actually good for you? Now, here's when comparison is bad. Comparison is bad when you see somebody doing something, achieving something, fulfilling their true potential in your eyes, your mind, or your perception, and you immediately feel bad about yourself. That's when comparison is bad for you. But here's when comparison is good for you. If you see somebody out there in the world doing something, achieving something, unlocking what you believe to be their true potential, and you see that, and you within 5 seconds or some short period of time take it upon yourself to do something similar to what they're doing, because there's a part inside of you that says, if they can do it, I can. Now, that's when comparison's good. That's when comparison can be healthy. You see, for most of my life, I have been in a negative comparison loop. Seeing somebody do something that I would love to do, and instead of doing something about it, I bitch and moan, generally in my head, about what's wrong with me and what's right with them. That's what I've done for most of my adult life. See somebody achieving something, smashing it, achieving their potential, making money, getting six-pack abs, going on the holiday that I've always dreamed of going on, and instead of doing something about it, I complain about how their life is better than mine. Now, one of the challenges, I believe, one of the dangers with social media is in a 2 or 3 minute window, if you're a scroller, you can see all that. In a 2 to 3 minute window, you can see the children that you don't have, the holiday that you're not on, the car that you don't own, and the seminar stage that you're not speaking on. You can see all that in a few minutes. The six-pack that you don't have, you can see the friendship group that you don't have, the marriage that you don't have. You can see all that in about 3 minutes if you look for it on social media. But what's really powerful is you can see all that, but you can also see all that. What does that mean? Well, what that means is I've come to learn that comparison can be healthy. But here's what I've learned it takes for comparison to be good. You've got to know yourself and you've got to love yourself. And that's easier said than done. Take it from me. Let's first talk about knowing yourself. How on earth do you know yourself? What does that even mean? Well, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm some wise guru like Alan Watts, who I'm a massive fan of, or Wayne Dyer. But what I've come to learn is I have blind spots. I have strengths. I have weaknesses. I have a awareness about myself that I'm positively imperfect. I know that I rub people up the wrong way, and I know I rub some people up the right way. That sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? But I know more than I've ever known, kinda, who I am. But I also know that I don't know who I am. And actually what I've come to learn is that's the part that most confuses people, which is I can sit here now and say, I know myself, but actually I don't. And actually admitting that makes me feel more like I know myself. I know that I don't really know who I am and what I'm really about. For most people, that's scary. But if you can admit that to yourself, that, you know what, as somebody said to me recently about life, he said most people are just trying to figure out for themselves, figure out as they go along. But most people are not willing to admit that. Most people aren't willing to admit that they don't know themselves. They think that they are a certain way and they can't change it. Most people aren't willing to admit that. I'm starting to get to a point where I'm willing to admit that. So one of the things I recognize is when you know yourself, Or to go to the second part, which I think is not easier but simpler, which is when you start to love yourself, which doesn't mean in an arrogant way if you decide that you're going to carry a Cristiano Ronaldo swagger throughout the course of your day, shoulder barging people as you go and walking like you're Conor McGregor. That floats your boat, go for it. But what I more mean is you just have a sense of self where you care what people think, but you don't care what people think. Meaning, you care what people think in the sense of if there is a feedback loop and it's consistent and it's regularly people saying something about you that they don't like, and it's a consistent feedback loop, and you pay attention to it and you go, should I use that feedback or should I dismiss it? As long as it doesn't change how you feel about yourself, then that feedback's good. Somebody might say to me at an event, you know, Miles, I really enjoyed you and how you spoke. Or somebody might say, I just didn't like him. That's cool. One thing I've learned about life is we can't get everybody to like us. We've got to be a little bit Marmite. And I don't mean intentionally antagonistic, but not everybody's going to like us. But when you love yourself, it kind of doesn't matter. So going back to the original point about comparison, in fact, before I do, one of the things I've learned that's helped me with loving myself is spending more time with myself in silence. And one of the things that I do for that, do a lot of meditation, a lot more than I used to. Sometimes 3 times a day, 45 minutes per time. Sometimes in silence, sometimes Joe Dispenza, but invariably 2 or 3 times a day I'll meditate. And it's in those moments of silence that I get to hear myself. And that's probably the part I said on an original video about permission, that for most of my life I've listened to the voices of gurus and motivational speakers because I didn't have a father growing up. So I looked for praise and validation outside of me. And what meditation has helped me to do, and I think it can help you to do, is help me to really know what is your intuitive inner voice. If you don't meditate, there's a reason to do it. Because if you really want to know yourself and what you're about and what matters to you in life, then meditation's, I've learned, is the best way to get me there. Kind of wish I'd have found it 10, 15 years ago before I started to take in all this information from other gurus, because it probably would have integrated faster when it's actually created a lot of conflicting ideology. Anyway, story for another video. So when you get to that point where you know yourself and you start to love yourself, then I think comparison's healthy, right? So like a couple of years ago, started to see people do HYROX. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's basically circuit training. HYROX, people hate me for saying that, but it basically is. And it's grown into a big phenomenon all over the world. I know some great people that do it really professionally at a really high level. And I'm a big fan, and I watched it from afar for about a year. Even tried to get a place on a race, couldn't get one, sold out. And then eventually I got a place, and eventually I did it, and I finished it, and I completed it, and I enjoyed it. People asked me, "Are you going to do it again?" I said, "I don't think so." I said, I only ever really wanted to do it for myself one time to prove to myself that I could do it. It wasn't something that, a bit like marathons. Like I know people that run marathons over and over again, and I know people that just do the London Marathon once and they're like, never again. Right? I feel a bit like that about HYROX. It wasn't really something I feel the need to do again. I enjoy the training, by the way. I generally, the type of training I do now is very, you could call it a hybrid, right? So it's very much how a HYROX athlete would train, and I just enjoy the training. But going back to my point, I was comparing myself to people doing HYROX, and there was maybe a tiny part of me initially, teeny tiny, that was doing it in a negative way, and then I got out of that and went, okay, if people are doing HYROX, maybe I should do it. Years ago, I saw people speaking on stages, delivering seminars. Maybe there was a tiny part of me that compared myself and felt unfavourable to them, and then went, maybe I should do that. And now I get the absolute privilege and the honour of speaking on stages all over the country, every single week, and I'm privileged that I get to do that. People say, how do you be away from your family for 2 or 3 nights every week? I say I can only do it because it feels like my mission, right? Footballers do it when they travel away for away games. WWE wrestlers, forgive me, that's my guilty pleasure. My lights just dropped. WWE wrestlers do it. They travel to shows around the world. They get away from their family because they love it, right? You'd only do that if you love it. And I do this because I love it. It's the only reason that I can do it. But I saw other people doing it and I went, I want to do that. Saw people doing HYROX, I went, I want to do that. Years ago, saw people writing books. I went, I want to do that. So I wrote a book. Saw people doing great vlogs on social media. So I went, okay, I want to do that. So this is when comparison's good, is when you see other people doing something and instead of feeling bad about yourself, you use it as a window of opportunity to go, well, if they can do that, then I can. That's when comparison is good.